Hello, my friends. We couldn't wait any longer, so we've gone to see the biggest teapot in the world. We'll go up and have a look inside. In 2013, it was given 4 stars, according to the Chinese standard, and it also entered the Guinness Book of Records as an outstanding architectural phenomenon. It's a symbol of Meitan, a very beautiful building indeed. We've reached the top. There's a hill in the centre of the city. It's about half the height of local skyscrapers. We have a beautiful view of the teapot. Right now we're looking at the front. There's a cup, and the teapot is behind it. Interestingly, when the construction was finished, some critics have said that it looks more like a Chinese alcohol jug than a teapot. Now it's a museum and a tea house. This lady works here. She'll tell us more about it, and I'll try to translate. The construction lasted 7 years, from 1999 to 2006. They hold tea competitions here, and have done for many years. These are the most famous people in Meitan. The museum exhibition starts here. The guy's telling us about all the showpieces. These are the works of famous calligraphers who specifically created them as a gift for the museum. And this is a true artifact. This is a real fossil of tea seeds that were found right here in this area. This is the most ancient find that proves the existence of tea tree. It's an ancestor of our tea trees. It's been tested by the King Lung Geological Academy, and they proved it was the direct ancestor of modern tea trees, existing more than 100 million years ago. And his fossil is here, in this museum, at the heart of the giant teapot. Now we're going to the second floor. Our tour around the teapot continues. On the second floor there's a tea house and a few separate rooms that each have a unique design. There are guests in the first room, so we went to the second one. We didn't want to disturb anybody. We can see that the space is organised very beautifully. I especially like that you sit on the floor in the modern Japanese style. I've mentioned this before, but nowadays in China they also set the tea on the floor, with no tables or chairs, and have the tea sitting down on the floor. Now we're going to the fourth floor. She's talking about how the tea ceremony was performed in the Tang dynasty. I don't know whether it's a reconstruction or whether that's how it was really done. I think it's at least 90% authentic. If you look at the ancient scrolls from the Tang dynasty, it was indeed very ritualized, and they mostly used compressed tea, which was brought from very far away. The tradition of powder tea was dominant then. Powder tea was kept in special tea caddies, like this one, cha guan for powder tea. Then they put it in this metal basket before grinding it, and put the basket on live coal to heat the tea a little. There's a special fan to blow on the coal. After it's heated, they grind the tea. This is where they separate the dust. Of course, these items are not originally from the Tang dynasty. These are replicas. Finally, they put the tea in this vessel. And at this point, they use a special spoon to take the tea. This is the spoon. It was used to put tea into the brewing vessel. Then they used another spoon to stir the tea. Then they took water from this vessel here and added it to the vessel with tea. They kept stirring the tea for a while. They added salt to the tea, and after that they could... This spoon is for the salt. After they added the salt, they poured the tea into cups, continuing to stir. That was the ceremony back then. I might have mistranslated something. Our guide is in a big rush. They're about to close the museum, so everything's a little accelerated.
这是我们第6楼茶道，就主要讲明朝与清朝的茶文。这边呢属于清朝。
We're on the 6th floor. This is the 6th floor of the teapot. Everything is in the style of the Qing dynasty. The style was more minimal in the Qing dynasty, as you can see. The furniture is much simpler. Actually looks like something you'd see in a modern tea house.
很多我们中国文化都已经很了不起。
我已经知道了一点点对茶叶有关系的事情，别的我都不太了解。对。
This is Lu Yu, the main tea god of the contemporary era, you could call him. He's the author of the Cha Qing. He lived in the time of the Tang dynasty. Everyone was drinking powdered tea back then. He travelled around China, and one of his major works is the description of the water springs he encountered. And of course the first Chinese book of tea.
Осторожно.
我们这个位置呢是茶杯的杯底。下面不是有一个杯子吗？
看到了。
We're at the top of the cup, which we saw from outside earlier. We're at the base of the teapot spout. In front of us, there's a sculpture of the Buddha's hand, and it's holding a teapot, and symbolically, it's guarding the biggest teapot in the world.
我们这儿还有一个特点，你走上去你就知道，你走上去。
The flowers are opening as you walk. Of course, it's a modern invention.
你看，当花全开了，花开富贵。
Flowers bloom after you. Amazingly beautiful.
这样的。
The guide just made a pass. She said, "Do you see those plump ladies? They're from the Tang dynasty." Back then, the plumper you were, the more beautiful you were considered. Just like me, she said. It's the first Chinese lady I've met who's proud of her figure, because it's the ideal figure of the Tang dynasty. These are tea farmers. They gather together and compete for whose tea tastes better, share their experiences, taste each other's tea. In many provinces, such competitions are still held to this day. It's a modern image depicting the time of the Tang dynasty, when they started making tu-cha. Here is depicted how they were making cha mo, or mocha, powdered tea, which is now famous in Japan as matcha. Since the Song dynasty, this tea sort of migrated to Japan. In China, it's not practiced now. In Japan, it established itself as an ancient tradition that originally came from China. This is teaware that was used in traditional tea ceremonies during the Song dynasty. You might have seen this picture in history books, Chinese or Japanese. They're not very different from those of the Tang dynasty, except a tea grinder was added, and an ancestor of the modern Japanese whisk used for matcha. These are replicas of the forms that were used to make compressed tea cakes, tea bricks, and other shapes that were made since as early as the Tang dynasty. They'd first produced metal forms and compressed water-soaked tea. The technology is different from the modern one, of course. They didn't have any steam generators back then. They couldn't use hot steam. But still, molds like this were also used. This is a film about Meitan. It's breathtaking. These people made a major contribution to the development of the tea industry in the 20th century. Factory owners, technologists, and everyone who was involved in the development of Meitan as a tea region. On the 8th floor, and it's auspicious, because the number 8 is the symbol of good luck in the Chinese tradition. There's a Taiwanese tea house. There's a map of Taiwan at the entrance. The tea set is again placed on the floor. The Taiwanese tea tradition is very close to the original ancient Chinese tradition, so they brew tea sitting on the floor, and considering that they were under Japanese occupation for 50 years, they absorbed both the Chinese tradition and the Japanese too. So ultimately this is what a contemporary Chinese tradition looks like. Although I've never seen such chairs in Taiwan. It must be a local adaptation. Usually in Taiwan they just sit on tatami, like they do in Japan. This is the 8th floor. We're about to reach the top of the teapot. We have 2 floors left, the 9th and 10th. As you can see, each floor is dedicated to a certain tradition, a certain page of the history of tea. A Tao hieroglyph greets us at the entrance to the 9th floor. There are 5 human figures in it. I noticed 3 at first, but actually there are 5. Here they are. This must be the most original image of the Tao hieroglyph that I've ever seen. On the 9th floor, there's a Japanese room, a traditional Japanese tea ceremony. It's forbidden to speak or get distracted during the tea ceremony, so they try to make it look as Japanese as possible, but it still looks more like China. But it's a good representation of how the Chinese see the Japanese culture. That's how it looks to me. And this is the Korean tea ceremony. Although it's covered with a cloth, maybe they'll show us later. So this is the Korean tea ceremony, and the Korean teaware is represented here. There's a teapot with a handle, kyusu, which is actually popular in Japan as well. The picture looks like shiboridashi with no lid. Teacup coasters, a tea caddy, a teaspoon, and a copper teapot. We're at the top of the tip of the teapot spout. Actually, the end point is right in front of me, and there's a charity box over there. It's a beautiful view of Meitan. Over there is the old town. The new town's over here. Very bright illumination. Now we're heading to the top 10th floor. And as you can see, laser beams are coming from there. Green lasers travel through the whole town. And the laser's really powerful. It doesn't really seem very safe. We got caught by it when we were on a mountain plantation across town. Just put the camera here. Let's sit down and enjoy some tea.
这是贵州的茶历史。
对，它相当于贵。